Hi Peeps! It's me again, Sid Rasmussen, and today there's another map. It's a map of the islands west of Alswick, and I'm doing the graticals on it because map isn't cool without graticals. Okay, I love puns a little bit too much, admittedly. But to get a bit more serious, this map is a map that is far from finished. It might look finished, but no, it isn't. Far from it, actually. The background picture that you can see in the map, that is something I have. I'm in the beginning. I made a bigger map. That is like a proto map. You can call it, and where I made all the climate zones and mapped out where those would be, and I didn't fill out the mountains because I honestly I'm not very good at knowing what will be at the mountains, but I try something, and I hope that is realistic enough. So yeah, but this is a map I will work on for quite a while, and one thing is that I wanted to show the process to you, to how to make those maps I make. So, and I also just kind of wanted to work on it to get it closer to being done. So yeah, here you have a map, and those islands, those graticals, those are, I think it was 5 degrees. So at least that island there, which just went out of the picture, you can see there it is. It is so big, that island, Amaria it is called. It's so big that it's easily its own continent. But it's called an island, but it's huge, honestly. And yeah, to get it distorted into, well, all maps are distorted because the screen I'm using, at least, is not a globe. It's not a ball. It's flat. It's rectangular. A bit more rectangular than usual, actually. But either way, you need to have things distorted, and then graticals can be a good guide to know how the map is distorted, and yeah, and hopefully this map will be very cool after a while. For making the graticals, I do not use the computer. I use the computer mouse, not the drawing table, because precision and all that. But yeah. So let's move on to today's topic. And just watch the graticals do themselves now. I recorded doing these graticals earlier today, and yeah. So let's just join the boredom of graticals. Actually, one thing I want to mention first. The projection I have chosen for this map, the software I have done to convert stuff from one projection to another. That is a program called G, G projector, and that is okay program to use. A bit buggy. It's a bit, you can call it simple maybe, because it's for world builders or other people. It's very niche, and then it's simple, but it is effective. So now towards today's topic. And today I decided we could talk a bit about writing or tropes, and I want to go directly to a trope that near everybody says you should not use. So yay. And this, and I want to talk about tropes you, in quotes, should not never use, and I kind of want to talk a bit about that notion in itself. So yeah, this trope that I'm talking about here now, that is the describing yourself using a mirror trope, or whatever you want to call it. Watching the mirror trope. I don't know, maybe we should call it mirror, mirror on the wall, how do I look? And it's a difficult trope to do well. And even though people with relatively little experience uses it, not really knowing what the trope is best used for, and thus, as so many people who don't know how to use the trope uses it, it gives trope a bad name. And yeah, so therefore a lot of people, or some people, let's be clear, some people, not all people even, quite few people, okay, you get the point. Some people talk about how you should avoid using this trope. That it is cliche. I don't know if it's cliche, but it's a trope that exists. And and I've seen it done right. I've seen it done really well, and you can use tropes, you can use cliches. That is okay, but one thing to remember when using cliches, especially, is that you understand the cliche. Always understand the cliche or the trope that you're using. So yeah, I feel I stalled a little bit, and stalling, that is actually a topic here. One of the problems, one of the reasons that the mirror watching trope often doesn't work, that's honestly because it can stall the story. Like the character goes up to the mirror and stares into the mirror and gives a 2-page description of everything you didn't need to know about that character. Okay, that was kind of extreme and worst case scenario, and honestly, don't do that. But again, it gives the reader a lot of description that they don't feel they need. Like, I don't care, frankly, if my character has a mole left of her nose. Okay, if that is something that is like very unusual with that character, maybe if that is one of very few descriptions, so that like the reader is like, okay, that girl with the mole. But if you are like describing precisely what makeup she has used, describing precisely everything, then it would take a lot of time for the reader to get through that. And that buff gives a lot of descriptions the reader doesn't feel the need. And it stalls the story and makes the reader think this was boring. And you don't want that. You want to go forward. Also, a little note on that drawing here. Here is evidence I can't draw. And I'm trying. And it... I admit I gave up after a while and went back to the map. So it's... And... So back to the mirrors. It adds very little to the story as well. So, honestly, the mirror... It's not needed, you know, like you could fill that time with something else, and the story might even improve if you omit it. And another point here is that I have often seen that it doesn't. Often has descriptions with very little motion. So I wrote an example of like things that doesn't work with this, actually describing my main character. And yeah, Victor looked at the mirror. He had an orange colored skin and red hair. Behind him he had feathery crimson wings attached to his back on the lower end of his rib cage. His arms were attached to his shoulders, the same way it was for the other Rinitus. His hair was curly and an attractive trait in New King City. Okay, I admit that was rushed writing, so sorry about that. So now I'm gonna say the current intro to my story, and this will most likely change. Yes or no yet. Victor flapped his crimson wing, and then I say it wrong, you know. Victor flapped his feathery crimson wings as the wind played with his clothes and dragged on his hands. He crossed his arms before his chest. It was cold for a man with a fire inside his very blood. Thus we know that Victor's blood is on fire. Okay, just kidding. But here you see like one omits details that is not strictly needed. Like I had to prioritize what does the reader need to know. I felt that the basic anatomy, like number of limbs that Victor has and that he has both wings and arms, was the top priority, and that he has clothes. He has clothes, people. He's civilized. So, but now you might ask, how can I use the mirror trope properly? So, maybe the most important thing to address here is to give the character a reason to study themselves. So, like, why does the character prioritize using time watching the mirror instead of doing other things? Because watching the mirror is not the most exciting thing to do in this world. Like, people do it, but why is it so important that it is part of the story? You have omitted that the character goes to the toilet most of the times, I hope. Or else that would be a quite repetitive story. So you omit a lot of things. Why do you include the mirror? There has to be a reason why you include the mirror. So the character needs to have a reason to go up to the mirror and study it. And also the mirror needs to, in some way or form, move the plot forward. Like, that action of studying yourself in the mirror needs to move the plot forward. Maybe it makes the reader realize something about the character, or the character realizes something about themselves, or something, you know. So it's just like, words with no reason. And when doing this mirror thing, omit everything that isn't necessary. Like, describing what brand of makeup the character uses, unless that is for some strange reason very central to the plot, or very symbolic, or anything like that. Omit it. I don't care. I don't care what makeup your character uses. And I suspect the reader doesn't need to know that either. Like, unless it is in some way or form important to the story, in some way or form, then include it if it's important. Include the important. So another thing that I would like have as a little tip or something, that would be to focus on the emotions. So, what does the character feel when they see themselves in the mirror? Do they feel bad for something they've done? Do they regret some scars they've gotten? Do they feel self-hatred because of how they look? Or do they feel confident because they look very good in their own eyes? And lean into that emotions more than what the character sees. Because what the character's eyes see when they see themselves, that only matters so much. Honestly. That how they feel, and maybe you can make a vague imagery of what they see, but what they need to have a lot of emotions in that. I think, and then I think mirror scenes can be excellent in stories. Like, use them if you know what to do. Or if a mirror scene fits into a story, use them. Like, I think I've seen maybe 2 times that scene being done quite well. And so yeah, but don't use it if you don't know what to do with it. So I try to rush down example on something, like an example on what I talked about. She washed her hands as the new her stared back at her. Everything changed after that accident. Even her face had been destroyed as scars filled its left side. How could she have been so foolish? So, what you may notice here is that there are 4 sentences. One of them describes her face. It only describes the scars, honestly. And it describes her regret of some accident that happened. So there was an accident that destroyed half her face. What was the accident? Whatever accident it was, she blames herself. Like, so I guess this kind of stands as a character introduction, like introducing the character and what the character have been through. So to kind of wrap this up a bit, the mirror watching scene, like most tropes, it can work and it can also be a disaster. And what is important is how you use it, and don't just use it to make the reader see what you see. Use it to communicate the character's feelings and experiences, not what the character's eyes see, but what happens inside the character's head. And don't let it stall the story, and don't pop into too many details into it. Like, let it be a bit swift and move on with the story, and optionally let the scene move the story forward. And yeah, I think that is it. You may see that I moved on from graticals to doing coastlines, so that will be something you will see a lot of forward, because I have to do the coastlines before doing other things. But yeah, enjoy the view of seeing more coastlines, and until next time, good luck with writing and other things you need luck to do. So see ya!